Good morning, class 9. Today we will start a new heading in civics, parliament. In the example of the office memorandum, do you remember the role of the parliament? Perhaps not. Since this decision was not taken by the parliament, you might think that the parliament had no role in it. But let us go back to the story and see whether parliament figures in it. Let us recall the points made earlier by completing the following sentences. The report of the Mandal Commission was discussed. The President of India mentioned in this the President made a. The decision was not directly taken in the Parliament, but parliamentary discussions on the report influenced and shaped the decision of the government. They brought pressure on the government to act on the Mandal recommendation. If the parliament was not in favor of this decision, the government could have gone ahead with it. Can you guess why? Recall what you read about the parliament in the earlier class and try to imagine what the parliament could have done if it did not approve of the cabinet's decision. Why do we need a parliament? Very important question. In all democracies, an assembly of elected representatives exercises supreme political authority on the behalf of the people. In India, such a national assembly of elected representatives is called parliament. At the state level, this is called legislature or legislative assembly. The name may vary in different countries, but such an assembly exists in every democracy. It exercises political authority on behalf of the people in many ways. Parliament is the final authority for making laws in any country. Underline this. This task of lawmaking or legislation is so crucial that these assemblies are called legislatures. Parliaments all over the world can make new laws, change existing laws, or abolish existing laws and make new ones in their place. Second, parliaments all over the world exercise some control over those who run the government. Underline, this is the second function of the parliament. The parliament exercises some control over those who run the government. In some countries like India, this control is direct and full. Those who run the government can take decisions only so long as they enjoy the support of the parliament. Otherwise, what happens? A vote of no confidence is passed. So underline this last line also. Those who run the government can take decisions only so long as they enjoy the support of the parliament. Third, parliaments control all the money that governments have. This is the third function. Parliaments control all the money that the government have. In most countries, the public money can be spent only when the parliament sanctions it. Parliament is the highest forum of discussion and debate on public issues and national policy in any country. Underline, this is the fourth important thing about the parliament. The parliament is the highest forum, it is the highest platform where discussions and debates can be held on public issues and national policy in any country. Parliament can seek information about any matter. Two houses of the parliament. In India, we have the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Since the parliament plays a central role in modern democracies, most large countries divide the role and powers of the parliament in two parts. They are called the chambers or houses. One house is usually directly elected by the people and exercises the real power on behalf of the people. The second house is usually elected indirectly and performs some special functions. The most common work for the second house is to look after the interests of various states, regions, or federal units. In our country, the parliament consists of two houses. Underline. The two houses are the Council of States, that is the Rajya Sabha, and the House of the People, that is the Lok Sabha. The President of India is a part of the Parliament. Underline this also. Although she is not a member of either house. It can be she or he, anybody. That is why all laws made in the houses come into force only after they receive the assent of the President. Unless the President signs the document, it cannot be declared into a law. That is why all laws made in the houses come into force. Laws become effective. Laws are implemented only when they receive a sanction from the President. You have read about the Indian Parliament in earlier classes. From the chapter 4, you know how Lok Sabha elections take place. Let us recall some key differences between the composition of the two houses of the Parliament. Answer the following questions. Now these questions are for you to answer. Our constitution does give the Rajya Sabha some special powers. Okay, I have left one paragraph. I am reading that. Which of the two houses is more powerful? It might appear that the Rajya Sabha is more powerful, or sometimes it is called the upper house and upper chamber, and the Lok Sabha is called the lower chamber. But this does not mean that Rajya Sabha is more powerful than Lok Sabha. This is just an old style of speaking and not the language used in our constitution. So which house is more powerful in the Indian democratic system? The Lok Sabha is more powerful. It is the house of the people. Our constitution does give the Rajya Sabha some special powers over the states, but on most matters the Lok Sabha exercises supreme power. Let us see how. Any ordinary law needs to be passed in both the houses. The law is passed in both the houses. This is an important sentence. Any ordinary law needs to be passed in both the houses. But if there is a difference between the two houses, the final decision is taken in a joint session among the members of both the houses who sit together. So if there is any kind of discrepancy, if there is a dispute in the decision of the members of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, a joint session is conducted, then the matter is discussed there and the matter is resolved. If there is a difference between the two houses, the final decision is taken in a joint session in which members of both the houses sit together. Because of the larger number of members, the view of the Lok Sabha is likely to prevail in such a meeting. That means the decision taken by the Lok Sabha has an upper hand and it is given more weightage. Lok Sabha exercises more powers in money matters. This is another important sentence. The Lok Sabha exercises more powers in money matters. Once the Lok Sabha passes the budget of the government or any money related law, the Rajya Sabha cannot reject it. That means if any money bill or any law related to financial matters is passed by the Lok Sabha, then even if the Rajya Sabha does not agree, it has no right to reject that law. The Rajya Sabha cannot reject it. The Rajya Sabha can only delay it by 14 days or suggest changes in it. The Lok Sabha may or may not accept these changes. So it is not essential for the Lok Sabha to accept the changes suggested by the Rajya Sabha. If Rajya Sabha disagrees over any financial law, over any money bill that has to be passed, it can think over the matter for 14 days. It can delay the matter for 14 days. But after that, it is considered automatically to be passed by the Lok Sabha. The Rajya Sabha can suggest some changes also in that law, in that bill, but the Lok Sabha is not bound to accept those changes or follow those changes. Most importantly, the Lok Sabha controls the Council of Ministers. Only a person who enjoys the support of the majority of members in the Lok Sabha is appointed the Prime Minister. Again, this is very important. The Lok Sabha controls the Council of Ministers. only a person who enjoys the support of the majority of the members of the Lok Sabha is appointed as the Prime Minister. As we know, in India, in the democratic country like India, when elections are held, that party which gets the clear majority forms the government. So the Prime Minister is appointed from the majority party who has won the elections. If the majority of the Lok Sabha members say they have no confidence in the Council of Ministers, all ministers, including the Prime Minister, have to quit. As you have studied in your earlier classes, this is known as collective responsibility. If a no confidence motion is passed against one minister, then the whole ministry has to resign, including the Prime Minister. All ministers, including the Prime Minister, have to quit. The Rajya Sabha does not have this power. So this is an exclusive power which has been given to the Lok Sabha. That is, a vote of no confidence can be passed in the Lok Sabha. And in that case, if the vote of no confidence is passed against more than one minister or for one minister, the whole ministry will have to resign. But this power is not being given to the Rajya Sabha. Political executive. Do you remember the story of office memorandum with which we started this chapter? We found out that the person who signed the document did not take this decision. He was only executing the policy decision taken by someone else. We noted the role of the Prime Minister in taking that decision. But we also know that he could not have taken that decision if he did not have the support from the Lok Sabha. In that sense, he was only executing the wishes of the Parliament. Thus, at different levels of any government, we find functionaries who take day-to-day decisions but do not exercise supreme power on behalf of the people. All those functionaries are collectively known as the executive. That means executive can be defined as those functionaries, those people who take day-to-day decisions, but they do not exercise supreme power on behalf of the people. These are collectively called executive. They are called executive because they are in charge of the execution of the policies of the government. This line defines executive very clearly. They are called executive because they execute, they bring into practice the policies which the government has formed. Thus, when we talk about the government, we usually mean the executive because it is the executive who implements the policies and programs which have been formulated by the legislature. Legislature makes laws and executive implements it. Political and permanent executive. In a democratic country, two categories make up the executive. One that is elected by the people for a specific period is called the political executive. Political leaders who take big decisions fall in this category. In the second category, people are appointed on a long-term basis. This is called permanent executive or civil servants. Persons working in civil services are called civil servants. They remain in office even when the ruling party changes. These officers work under political executive and assist them in carrying out the day-to-day administration. Can you recall the role of political and non-political executive in the case of office memorandum? That means political executives are those who are basically civil servants. They serve the country, but they don't keep changing with the changing government. You might ask, why does the political executive have more power than non-political executive? Why is the minister more powerful than a civil servant? The civil servant is usually more educated and has more expert knowledge of the subject. The advisors working in the finance ministry know more about economics than the finance minister. Since the ministers may know very little about the technical matters that come under their ministry, this could easily happen in ministries like defense, industry, health, science and technology, mining, etc. Why should the minister have the final say on these matters? The reason is very simple. In a democracy, the will of the people is supreme. The minister is elected by the people and thus empowered to exercise the will of the people on their behalf. So it means that even if expert knowledge is attained by other people who assist the ministers in the governance of their ministry, but whatever the minister will say, his discretion is considered final because he is the representative of the people. The minister is elected by the people and thus empowered to exercise the will of the people on their behalf. She is finally answerable to the people for all the consequences of her decision. That is why whatever is the minister saying, actually he is not announcing his decision, he is announcing the decision of the people because he is representing the people. She is finally answerable to the people for all the consequences of her decision. That is why the minister takes all the final decisions, because he will be answerable to the people. If his decision is right or wrong, in both the cases, he is answerable to the people. The minister decides the overall framework and objectives in which decisions on policy should be made. The minister is not expected to be an expert in the matters of her ministry. The minister takes the advice of experts on all technical matters. But very often, experts hold different opinions or place before her more than one option. Depending on what the overall objective is, the minister decides. So finally, the decision taken by the minister is considered final. He is a representative of the people. His wish is the wish of the people actually. That is why his discretion is final. Actually, this happens in any large organization. Those who understand the overall picture take the most important decisions, not the experts. The experts can tell the route, but someone with a larger view decides the destination. In a democracy, elected ministers perform this role. The role of taking larger decisions is decided by elected ministers in a democracy. Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister is the most important political institution in the country. Yet there are no direct election to the post of the Prime Minister. The President appoints the Prime Minister, but the President cannot appoint anyone she likes. The President appoints the leader of the majority party or the coalition of parties that commands a majority in the Lok Sabha as Prime Minister. As explained earlier, after the elections are held, the party which has got maximum votes in the clear majority in the Lok Sabha, they form the government, and from that party the Prime Minister is selected. The President appoints the Prime Minister, but he cannot choose the Prime Minister from anywhere he feels like. The President appoints the leader of the majority party or the coalition parties that commands a majority in the Lok Sabha. So the person that has been chosen as the leader of the majority party, he or she becomes the Prime Minister. In case no single party or alliance gets the majority, the President appoints the person most likely to secure a majority support. The Prime Minister does not have a fixed tenure. He continues in power so long as he remains the leader of the majority party or coalition. As I have said just now, if a vote of no confidence is passed, then in the Lok Sabha, then the whole ministry, including the Prime Minister, will have to resign. So he continues in power as long as he remains the leader of the majority party or the coalition party, coalition government. After the appointment of the Prime Minister, the President appoints other ministers on the advice of the Prime Minister. They are called the Council of Ministers. The ministers are usually from the party or the coalition that has the majority in the Lok Sabha. The Prime Minister is free to choose ministers as long as they are members of Parliament. Sometimes a person who is not a member of Parliament can also become a minister, but such a person has to get elected to one of the houses of the Parliament within 6 months of appointment as minister. This is a special case. It is sometimes, in exceptional cases, it is not essential that the person who wants to become the one of the Council of Ministers, he or she should be the member of the Parliament. Even if he is not, then within 6 months time he should become the member of either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. Only then he can be appointed as one of the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers is the official name for the body that includes all ministers. It usually has 60 to 80 ministers of different ranks. So there are 3 different types of ministers: the cabinet ministers, ministers of state, and ministers of state are further divided into, they have their own council, they have their own council of ministers. So basically 2 categories are there, 2 important categories: the cabinet ministers and the ministers of state. Cabinet ministers assist the Prime Minister at the central level, and ministers of state assist the chief minister at the state level. Now in the next class we will do in detail cabinet ministers and ministers of state.